Hi there, my name's Tom, and I'm back talking about F1 Fantasy. We are on the eve of the Spanish Grand Prix. We've just had FP1, FP2. Let's have a look at how the teams did, how the drivers did, and try and work out, of all the different upgrades that come into the track this weekend, see who's looking strong, see what's happened just have a quick look previously in other races to see how the practice sessions may indicate where we're looking at in terms of qualifying pace, and then obviously as a result of that, the race pace and where the fantasy points are likely to come from. So first things first, before we can really look at the team that I want to show you, there's a couple of different builds that I'm looking at, one team in particular. Let's have a quick look at the results from FP1, FP2. Obviously got FP3 to come, but I've had time to make the video between FP3 and the deadline, so this is all you're getting, mate. Deal with it. Right, so we got Leclerc in P1, Sainz in P2 and FP1, and again the Ferrari's looking pretty strong, FP2 in P1 and P4. The Ferraris, like I've already mentioned, upgrades. They've brought in lots of upgrades. This is a big package for this weekend for the Ferraris. So I'd expect them to be on top, to be honest. And if they weren't, then I'd be kind of worried. Leclerc looking good for the turbo driver again. P1, P1. He's shown great consistency in the past. We have a quick look at predicting qualifying positions. We go across Leclerc. In my predictions, he's come in Bahrain, P1 into P1. In Saudi Arabia, he's P1 into P2. Australia, he was P1 into P1. And Miami, he was P1 to P1. So at the moment, he's P1, P1. So at the moment, it's looking like a Charles Leclerc pole. So definitely, well, I wouldn't say definitely, but for me personally, I think he has to be the turbo driver. Even though Perez is on that race streak, I think Leclerc, more likely to beat his teammate and more likely to actually win the race, outweighs it for me in terms of the turbo driver. For Perez versus Leclerc. So yeah, the Ferrari's looking strong, not a million miles ahead of everyone else, and obviously right behind them are the Mercedes, who I anticipated being strong. They were strong here in Barcelona back in March during pre-season testing. Obviously the car has changed quite a bit since then, but they still show pace, and historically Mercedes have been very strong. Well, Mercedes have been very strong everywhere, but the last 5 races have been won by Lewis Hamilton at this track. So yeah, Mercedes historically looking good, and at the moment looking good. In the practice sessions, we see Mercedes P4 and P6 in the first session, and then P2, P3. So Mercedes are looking really strong. The trouble is, from a fantasy point of view, they're really, really expensive. Hamilton is way too expensive for me to consider. The Mercedes, as a constructor, absolutely out of the question. They're expensive, and they're not on any streaks this weekend, although they could be on a race streak, I believe, for Monaco, which is coming up next weekend. That's an interesting one to look out for. But the only one that really interests me from a fantasy point of view would be George Russell. He's put in P4 and P2. The trouble is with the Mercedes, they've shown this sort of promise before, and they've proven that they are very inconsistent going from the practice sessions into qualifying. I could show you. You can look for yourself. I'm not going to go through it yourself. These are just for examples. You can see for yourself whilst I'm talking. Basically, the Mercedes, they either look really good and then they do badly, or they don't look very good and they do really well. It's just too inconsistent, and I don't want to put my chips onto the middle of the table with Mercedes at the moment until they've really proven that they are back in the fight. Like they're looking good, but the same thing happened the other week with George Russell in Miami. He was like averaging like P3 or P4, I think he was, and he comes in fact, let's have a quick look. He was averaging P4 through the practice sessions, looking really, really good. Comes in P12. That lack of consistency worries me about Mercedes, so I'll probably be avoiding them. If you're going to go for anyone, I'd recommend George Russell, but it's completely up to you, obviously. Red Bulls are looking pretty decent as well. I think they've had a couple of upgrades, some weight losses, up to 7 kilograms or something like that. I'm not sure exactly from what I remember. So the Red Bulls are looking strong. Verstappen could have been P1 and FP1. He got some traffic in the final sector. I believe he was purple in sector 1 and sector 2. So Verstappen potentially could have been P1 in the first session. And down in P5, not the most exciting position in the world, but he's up there. So I do think the Red Bulls are really strong as a constructor this weekend. And I know Perez, he didn't take part in FP1 because he had what's his face, Yuri Vips down in P20 there. I'm not going to read too much into that because he's inexperienced. Perez pops up in P7. I'm not worried about Perez's performance so far. I think Perez is going to be in my team, but we'll have a look at that in a second. I think the Red Bulls are looking pretty good. And the fact that they're on a double streak as a constructor and Perez is on a race streak as a single driver is also, a big factor. The person who desperately wants to trick me into getting into my team again is Fernando Alonso. who here, you can see here he's in P5 and also down here in P6. He's frustrating me throughout the season. He's been continually promising things, and I think the Alpine is looking really, really quick on that one lap pace, but they can't seem to quite get there on the race pace. Ocon showed some signs of that coming back through the field in Miami, but I'm just not convinced by Alonso despite this constant promising. It's like, when it's like the boy who cried wolf, but like the other way around. Like Alonso's like, I'm going to do really well. I'm going to do really well. Then he just like screws my fantasy team over. So I've lost some faith in Alonso. Could be wrong though. Home race. He's won here before. In fact, I think his last win that he had in F1 was at this track, if I'm not mistaken. So I do think Alonso is potentially a good pick, and I think if you want to go for him at, I think 12.4 million at the moment, I think it's fine. One of these days, Alonso is actually going to have a good race. He's going to stop getting unlucky, and he's going to get that performance out of the car. And this could very well be the race. I just think there are potentially better options, which I'm going to look at in a minute, instead of Alonso. Norris was another person who's really interested me in the build-up to this weekend, and I was really, really anticipating McLaren to be strong here, and, well, what do I know? They've not been doing so great. FP1, yeah, they were fine, P7, P9, but then they had lots of issues. I think Norris broke his floor in FP2, so not super exciting to be looking at Norris in this race. Both McLaren boys, as I said in the last video I made, have shown a lot of consistency. Again, if we pop it back to the practice session, hypothetical quali into the actual quali, and look at the averages, both Norris 0.5 and Ricciardo at 0.8 are extremely accurate from going from practice to qualifying. And at the moment, they're both like in the bottom half sort of thing on average. Obviously, you need to see what happens in FP3, and Norris is being affected. If we look at Norris, he was a 21.2 and Ricciardo was a 21.7. So he was 5/10 quicker than Ricciardo. Let's imagine he was 5/10 quicker than Ricciardo's time in FP2. He would be at 20.8. So 20.8 would still only put Norris in at around P10, P11. So it doesn't really excite me. That gives him probably an overall average around P9, P10. So it looks like, especially the Mercedes looking strong this weekend. There's a better option for me is probably Carlos Sainz, who's just like $1 million or so more expensive than bloody hell, I'll get the name right in a minute, than Norris. So unfortunately, Norris not looking too exciting, but I wouldn't write him off whatsoever. I think he's still potentially a good option, but McLaren's have just been a bit underwhelming. Let's stop waffling about all the different positions here. Let's actually have a look at the teams, because I think that's probably what everyone actually really wants to look at. This is my current team. Like I say, Alonso's just been skulking around in the background there, just draining my points. So let's get rid of him to start things off. Even though, like I said, I don't know what's happened there. I've got a blank thing there. I don't know what's going on. Poor old Ocon's just been like retired from F1. But I think the best option for me, and this is interesting, is Valerie Bottas. I want to get Bottas in my team. Bottas has proven, despite woes in practice, he can transform into a really good performance in qualifying. In fact, I know you probably fed up of seeing the spreadsheet, but let's throw it back to the spreadsheet just briefly. Let's have a look back in Bahrain, where he struggled really in FP1. In fact, he didn't even put a time in FP1. And then he still pops up in P6, and also in Miami as well. He had some very limited running. He's P17, didn't even set a lap in FP2, and then P14 in FP3. So you're thinking oh my god, he sucks. He's not going to do well. And then he puts it in P5, and that's on a track which Bottas was completely unfamiliar with, other than running on the simulator for the last couple of weeks. And we go to Spain, which is a track which Bottas, and let's face it, just about everyone on the grid at the moment is hugely familiar with. I have the utmost confidence that Bottas will perform well come qualifying and also race pace. The Alfa Romeo's got a bunch of upgrades this weekend, and I'm confident that Bottas is going to perform despite what's going on at the moment in practice sessions. Like I say, it's happened before. Bottas still brings out the performance on the days that matter, and if he gets in the top 10 this race, he will then be on a race streak, plus 10 points going into Monaco, which, it saves a substitution going into the next race. I think Bottas, he's proven, there's some reliability potential issues with the Alfa Romeo, but overall, Bottas has just proven to be a super, super consistent driver, and he's in my team almost certainly. That's it. Magnusson's an interesting one. I think the Haas haven't bought any upgrades whatsoever. Kind of unexciting in practice session times. In fact, Magnusson was outperformed in FP2 by Mick Schumacher. Schumacher's definitely coming out of his shell a little bit, and that worries me as a Magnusson fantasy owner. What? Oh, we've lost someone else here. Schumacher's disappeared as well. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, so it worries me as owning K-Mag that he's not going to get those easy points for beating his teammate. And I think the next best option is probably going to be Albon in that sort of price range, because he's going to, he's going to beat Latifi. Latifi's just, I don't want to hate on Latifi, but he's just not doing well. Like, even Nick De Vries came in with very limited experience and he beats him by a 10th. Albon beats him by almost a second. Like, I don't know what Latifi's playing at, to be honest. So Albon, that's great for us as fantasy managers. I think Albon is going to be a fantastic option. I've done an entire video about Albon if you want to go back and see my opinion on Albon, and that hasn't really changed. I think Albon is going to be a great pick this weekend because he's shown he's really good at tyre management, and I think the tyre degradation is going to be quite a big factor in Spain. It's super, super hot. And I think Albon's said in the past that the C2 tyre, which is this race's medium tyre, is going to be really strong on the Williams for whatever reason. They don't really know why. I don't really know why, but it's strong, and it's going to be the medium tyre this weekend. So it'll be a popular race tyre, I imagine. I don't think necessarily the hard tyre is going to be ultra popular, but drivers complain about that sort of thing all the time, and then they end up using it. So we'll see. I think Albon's a great option. I will say one thing about Albon: he's getting all his points through gaining position space. Not all his points. I think I worked out in the last video around 60% or something like that of his points. Yeah, I think it was roughly 60%, or 2/3 of his points were coming from positions gained. Do we anticipate the positions gained happening much in this race? We look at how the Williams are performing. They're down here in 18th and 19th consistently. Pretty much back of the grid. So yes, that's the strength of Albon in gaining those positions, but are there going to be that many DNFs in Spain? I mean, there could be some overheating issues possibly with the heat. There could be tyre degradation. Could be some trouble with the tyres, which causes Albon, with his great tyre management and everything, and the Williams running well on those tyres, to jump up the positions. I don't know, there's a lot of speculation, but I think out of the options that we've got down there, it's basically Magnusson or Albon, or if you want one of the green Red Bulls and Lance Stroll. I think that's the only other really option. Haven't really talked about Aston Martin very much because they just don't excite me. Yeah, there's this whole big hoo-ha about them being the green Red Bull. They do look like the Red Bull car, like it looks like they basically just copied the Red Bull bodywork and everything, but they're still not getting like super great performance out of it. Let's have a quick look at the positions again. Stroll in that, like I say, in that price bracket along with Magnusson, or slightly dearer along with Magnusson and Albon. Stroll in P12 and P13. It's not super exciting, and historically we've seen Stroll do, apart from what happened in Miami, Stroll has gone from sort of reasonable in practice down. He's basically losing positions from practice qualifying, so Stroll doesn't excite me particularly. Again, he can get those points gained by getting the +2 points per position game if he doesn't qualify particularly well, but I want to see more from the Aston Martins before I jump on them. I want to go more on what drivers I trust, and Albon is one I trust. I'm not going to go any further on Albon. I think Albon's going to come in the team. And I've already said about Norris not performing in that price range. The only real option is Carlos Sainz, and I think the Ferraris are strong. So this is probably going to be my team going forward. I want to see what happens in FP3 before I do anything else, but this is probably going to be the team. There is an argument to have Ferrari instead of Red Bull, and I think the argument is that it frees up loads of money if you wanted to gamble on the Mercedes. I mean, I don't know why. Russell's still dropping. He was 89% a minute ago. Now he's 91%. So Russell's still dropping at the moment. So you could see a price fall for Russell for whatever reason, even though he's doing really well. Don't know what's going on there. So you could get a discounted Russell come the morning. Who knows? And then that frees up some. Like I say, the Ferraris free up that space if you think Russell's going to do particularly well. And at the moment, the Mercedes are looking like they're podium contenders, but as I've already said previously in the video, I don't trust the Mercedes, and it's fantasy for me is about trusting the drivers, trusting the constructor that you're going for. And I think although this build here is potentially a good option, I think most likely I'm going to be going for this other build of Carlos Sainz in here. Home race, Carlos Sainz. If you haven't already, make sure that you're following me on Twitter at PotPanManF1, and if you haven't already, join my league. Put the code in the description below. And also, if you haven't already, feel free to go back and see my other videos. Like I said, there's a video on Albon aimed kind of specifically about the Spanish Grand Prix, but also just Albon in general. So it might be useful to get more of my opinion on Albon going into this race. But yeah, this is the team. Let me know what you're thinking. You agreeing with me? Are you disagreeing? I don't know. I want to hit that consistency. I want to pick those drivers and constructors I trust. It's all about the trust. That's what it is. That's me. That's my entire thoughts built out. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like and all that good stuff. And I'll catch you from Monaco in just a few days' time. Oh my god, everything's happening so fast. Thanks very much for watching. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Good luck with your fantasy teams. Bye bye.